Welcome to Extending Grace Podcast. This podcast focuses on wellness over the workplace by managing our emotions. We explore emotions, the core reasons for those emotions, and apply biblical principles to help us cope as well as other coping strategies. I am Darlene Amos-McElroy, your host. I am the author of I Ate the Cake, A Journey for Justice, my memoir, which is the motivation for this podcast. This book can be purchased on Amazon and other major book retailers. If you read the book, please leave a review. Today's topic is going to be about workplace anxiety. When you read the book, you will see that I express having these symptoms based on the culture of my environment at that time. I am now a licensed professional counselor. I am working for myself and I'm very grateful for it. However, I would like to extend the same grace that was given to me to survive that time period in my life to others who may be experiencing the same. Workplace anxiety symptoms can be constant worrying, crying, feeling irritable, tired, and tense. A lot of times you may respond to the environment or your supervisors who are putting you in those situations as being irritable, which I was accused of being, but no one took the responsibility for why the environment was that way. You may feel like you need to be perfect because of constant monitoring, having trouble sleeping with the fear of what you're going to do the next day or the anticipation of the next day, having trouble concentrating or remembering things while you're at work. And of course, it can occur when you're at home if you bring that work environment to your home. Workplace anxiety can also cause you to lose interest in your work. Symptoms of overeating and undereating as well. There are many factors that can cause workplace stress. Some include job performance, toxic workplace cultures, a lack of workplace safety and support, boredom, or poor relationships with workplace colleagues. We see so many times on social media people putting, I'm just sitting in my car dreading to go in, or a meme about someone sitting in the car listening to music or just trying to get prepared for that workday. These things are real. And sometimes we have to acknowledge that I am suffering, I am going through this in order to get the help that we need. Sometimes toxic workplace cultures result in bullying, which is a persistent, unwelcome behavior, mostly using unwarranted or invalid criticism. So, not all job performance is based on valid criticism. Sometimes, when people are simply trying to discourage you, bully you, or get you to quit, they will use invalid criticism, fault finding, exclusion from activities where they're inviting other people to maybe go on a workplace trip, but they're intentionally excluding you. Isolation, being treated differently, being shouted at. And yes, trust me, there are people who their way of managing others is to scream and shout at them. Now, fortunately, I did not experience anyone shouting at me, but others around me did. Excessive monitoring is what I experienced, and that is a form of can be a form of bullying and much more. Now, the reason why the excessive monitoring can be a form of bullying is because when there is no goal to help the situation or maybe help you improve in a particular area that has been identified and you have agreed that needs to be worked on, or you can see where you can work on in that area, then the monitoring could simply be just to irritate you and not any professional goal whatsoever. And that is what I experienced. There was no professional plan or layout and any need to improve for the monitoring to continue that could continuously occur with my job. Bullying has nothing to do with managing. According to Lewis psychology, good managers manage staff and bad managers bully. You see, bullies project their inadequacy onto others to avoid facing up their inadequacy, to avoid accepting responsibility for their behavior, and to reduce their fear, their own fear of being seen for what they are. Despite a confident or self-assured image, the bully have low self-confidence and low self-esteem. Low self-esteem is a factor highlighted in many studies of bullying. It is a great article to read at Lewis Psychology on bullying at work. If you haven't experienced a hostile workplace environment, I am happy for you. It is possible to not recognize workplace bullying. So if you haven't experienced it, read the article anyway, because maybe you can help some of your coworkers by having that empathy for them. If you think you have experience and you're not certain, because the culture can be so toxic that you may not even recognize what it should be. So consider reading that article at Lewis Psychology, Bullying at Work. Read that for your information. Now, anxiety undermines our ability to use personal resources to resolve issues. Anxiety overestimates the problem and underestimates our abilities. Now that I am past the trauma, I'm not say past, but have healed some and still healing from the trauma of workplace bullying, I am able to self introspect or soul search. The term introspection is also used to describe a research technique that was first developed by psychologist Wilhelm Wundt, also known as experimental self observation. One's technique involved training people to carefully and objectively as possible analyze the content of their own thoughts. Self introspection is a psychological process that involves looking inward to examine your thoughts, emotions, judgments, and perceptions. Sometimes we're able to, we can learn to do this. You may need additional assistance to get the help to learn how to introspect from therapy. However, at that time when I was writing the book, or when I was experiencing in the book, my emotions was so intense that self introspection was impossible for me at that time. It wasn't a skill that I had. My process of reflecting allows me to become more self aware now. In reflection, now I realized that I perceived a threat and became reactive to the threat. So I'm going to look at the definition. I'm going to go through an example of I Ate the Cake, A Journey for Justice, and break down the definition of what I could have done. So here's the situation. Frequent observations. And I'm one of the assistant principals, Kelly, was sitting in my classroom. And on page 40 of I Ate the Cake, A Journey for Justice, the revised edition, I'm going to read this particular situation. Kelly was previously a teacher and department leader in our school. Along with a few others, I was not happy about her return. Elise shot arrows through Kelly as well. During Kelly's time as department leader and co-worker, she came to harass me. Once, after completing my attendance, I got up from the computer prepared to begin the lesson. Sitting in the back of my class, unannounced, was Kelly. Because I previously had several incidents with Kelly and Elise, I knew Kelly's presence signaled Elise arrows being shot again. Walking to the student's desk where she sat, I questioned, "Why are you here?" She responded, "I'm just here." My daughter had Kelly's class during the same period. Kelly should have been with her student teacher. There was another let's break her plan. Seeking clarity, I asked, "Are you observing me?" She nervously chirped, "No, I'm just here." Annoyed and confused, I taught my students while Kelly sat in the classroom. That evening, I addressed the situation head on. After arriving home, I emailed the principals and Kelly. I asked why Kelly observed me. She was a teacher without administrative rights for unannounced observations. I stated I would not allow her to bully me and requested a meeting with Kelly. Elise rarely responded to emails and maintained her reputation. Jennifer informed Kelly came to my classroom as a new collaboration plan within the department. Kelly and I had a worthless meetings about her goals as a department leader. In the meeting, I addressed the teacher next to me was new to the district. I had frequent observations where the new teacher had none nor the help she desired. Kelly claimed she was doing something new in the department. The following week, she observed the teacher next to me, but did not observe the others in our department for the entire school year. I Ate the Cake, A Journey for Justice, pages 41 and 42. So here's the thought that I had throughout this situation. Let's break her plan. Okay, so in my mind, when I saw her, based off the patterns they had given me, my thoughts were, we're going to break her. My emotions were annoyed and confused. So I sought clarity. Now I was able to some kind of way manage my emotions enough to seek clarity. And I asked, why are you in my room? Now, mind you, I'm sure it was not in a friendly way. She denied observing me, simply that she was in my room. So this is not the norm in education nor the workplace environment that I was accustomed to. Only if you have received notification and usually a supervisor for class walkthroughs. Now, a supervisor did not have to give you notification or walkthrough, but it's going to be a supervisor that would come in your classroom and observe you. My perception or my interpretation of that at that time is that Elise, the principal, sent her in and is trying to get me. Now, if I'm thinking like this, then you know that my emotions are going to be negative emotions. My judgment was Kelly is watching me for Elise, trying to find something to write me up for. My actions were emotionally dysregulated, and I'm sure the students saw me as angry, disrupting the relationship between the students and myself, as well as my classroom environment. Now, that was their goal, because one of the things she mentioned in the meeting was that I wasn't pleasant and that I seemed to be annoyed. Now, if she's going to use that, she could, well, she can, but the basis of that was what they were doing. But because I did not have the tools to balance my emotions at that time, I gave them ammunition. Now, I've learned to give myself some grace. I understand this situation would irritate and anger most people. My goal today is to help those who are or will face these situations. If I had the coping tool in managing the anxiety, I would have asked myself, where is the threat? You see, anxiety is normal. Anxiety helps us to prepare for threats or danger. So we don't want to get rid of anxiety when it's in the proper time and place. But when it becomes abnormal, meaning that we're not using it for safety, then we must ask ourselves to cope, where's the threat? If I were able to do that at that time, I would have been able to reframe the situation for a proactive response instead of being reactive. So I'm going to look at that same situation and we're going to reframe the situation under the skill of where's the threat. We're going to look at it through facts and facts only. So here's the thought. Kelly is in my room unannounced. That's a fact. Kelly is a teacher. Fact. Kelly has no supervisory privileges. Fact. Whatever she documents by law is void. cannot be used as observation, as she stated she was in my room and not observing fact. Okay. So if I'm using those facts, think about how the emotions will settle, because I'm telling myself, here are the facts, and I'm giving the facts only. Notice I'm not putting any emotions in here because I'm trying to analyze where's the threat. If a fire department came into a building, the fire is on building. They're not going to ask, how are the people feeling? They're going to look for the facts because there is a threat, a real threat. If we can learn to use the skill when there's an increased anxiety, where's the fact? Then we can come up with reasons to help ourselves balance the emotion. Now, where is the threat? What can harm me professionally? Based on the facts, nothing that Kelly is doing can harm me. Absolutely nothing. But during that time, I didn't see that. Only my actions and my possible response to Kelly can harm me professionally. Who controls my actions? When I think about that, I empower myself because Kelly or anyone else cannot control my actions. I control my action. I manage my emotions. Therefore, I empower myself, and empowerment brings more positive feelings. Positive feelings allow for better decision making. I wouldn't have talked as much as I did about these situations had I had this skill of analyzing the situation for facts and identifying the threat. As long as those bullies heard and saw that I was negatively impacted and reactive, they would continue, and they did. My anxiety and extreme discomfort was their daily game because they could not do anything to me. Again, I lived in anxiety unknowingly. I went from flight to fight. I responded before working in Garland ISD in flight mode, meaning I would be ready to quit at the drop of a dime in my professional and my personal life, to be honest. During Garland ISD, I remained in fight mode. I discussed in the memoir God showing me I needed to stop running and learn to manage my emotions. Reflection has allowed me to understand that I live in a perpetual state, a perpetual state of anxiety, which explains some sleepless nights and other things that come with this state of mind. So, what happened is that you go to a workplace environment, and the intensity of those interactions or the job performance causes you to have all of this worry, all of these desires to leave or to quit or to cry or to be worried or to be angry. And so you're there half the day, well, 8 hours of the day. You're in anxiety mode. Unfortunately, what happens to many of us when we leave the environment, we stay in the environment mentally. So we are in a perpetual state of anxiety from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed, if we get sleep at all. When you look back on your life, you may have also had anxiety in your formative years. And this is why I do recommend for some people, not all, but for some people, to seek therapy, because someone may be able to help you to see how you responded and where this anxiety came from in your formative years. Usually, stressors will increase the anxiety, but it may not be where you learn to cope this way. I didn't have the skills or the understanding to manage the intense thoughts and feelings, but not all was lost. God used it to his glory and to my benefit. And I am thankful that I am able to pass this on to others. Please share this video and podcast with others and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'm hoping that it will help all those that listen. Now, one thing about bullies is that bullies watch their targets. They identify their weaknesses and cultivate their plans to attack. We see this from the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis. Satan knew, he knew what Eve and Adam would possibly want. He knew what question to ask. He watched them. And you see in the Bible where Eve and Adam and God fellowship with one another. Why didn't he show up when God was there talking to them? He didn't. He waited. So you need to realize that bullies are looking for your reactiveness from the targets. So if you're the target, they're waiting for you to react. Emotional reactivity happens when intense emotions are triggered by an external event. Often the event leaves you feeling hurt, angry, or defensive. These triggers may cause you to lash out or act impulsively, doing or saying things you later regret. You can find this article by Dr. Ori on psychologistnyc.com. Dr. Ori also explains that you may be emotionally reactive if you find yourself doing the following. You feel that you have no control over what happens or what you say. Okay, so you have no control. You feel, I'm not saying you don't have it, but you feel that you don't have any control over what you do or what you say. You may be emotionally reactive if you say hurtful things to people, including yourself, in moments of anger. Your moods may change quickly and without warning. You have suffered from depression or anxiety. You may also be emotionally reactive if you feel rage at the slightest perceived criticism. Notice I said perceived. You may be emotionally reactive if your reactions are disproportionate to what is happening around you. So, say if someone doesn't bring you an extra donut and you flip over your desk, now that is not proportionate to what that emotion is not proportionate. Now, I know that's lightheartedness, but some people really do flip out over, the smallest things. You may be emotionally reactive. You may want to listen on the other video that I was talking about on the Esther story. It is on silence. It's using your silence as a weapon. Go back and listen to that video if you haven't, because it teaches us and it shows us a perfect example of being in danger, but benefits of emotional regulation. Now, most of us are not in that type of danger, but even in this particular video on Esther, using your silence as a weapon, it shows us how emotional regulation benefits us. Read your bully's emotions and watch their actions. This will help you to see what they're trying to do. You must also understand the emotional climate of your work environment. Your leader creates the emotional climate by their actions and how they manage and how they lead. I did not always understand why school principals had such a responsibility through the district's eyes. Like if the school environment and the culture went down and the scores were not producing, that principal was held accountable and responsible. Now I saw this more so in when I was in Dallas ISD, but I learned from a very impressive. He's older now. He was a very young principal who came into Dallas ISD at the school that I was in at that time, and that environment was horrible. The Texas Education Agency had to come in, and by the time that school flipped over, this particular principal came in. Dr. Hernandez, Eddie Hernandez is his name, phenomenal guy during that time of leadership. Well, he came in with the idea of that he was going to make people do certain things, like make people stay after school for tutoring. However, I want to say within a couple of weeks, his whole dynamic just changed. And he showed so much support and loyalty to the staff that he won the staff over. He had meetings with each grade level, telling them how they were going to respect the teachers and respect the school, and that at the time that we had them was a long time, longer than their parents, and they were going to respect the school or he would issue consequences to those. And he did it with each grade level. I will never forget that because he just totally within a couple of weeks changed the emotional climate of that school environment. And yes, that school environment changed. The grades, the scores went up, and he was promoted. And from my understanding, now he's superintendent of another school district. Now, that's why you want to be, if you're in a work environment that you have that type of support, or you're not being harassed, or you're not being bullied, or you've been not constantly monitored, or the workplace is not toxic, hang on, because the culture of the workplace is very important to your survival in your career and your skill set. The workplace and culture can make or break you. Now let's go back to the introspection as a technique, and we're going to look at that as a spiritual weapon. Yes. You see, a lot of the things that we learn is not far from the Bible. And this is why I really do love therapy, because the technique that I use, cognitive behavioral therapy, I like it because it causes us to think about what we are thinking about. So let's look at Psalm 139, verses 23 and 24. David cries out to God, asking God, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way of everlasting. David realizes that only God knows our hearts and true motivations. In order to be in alignment with God's will, David wants God to remove any offensive way from him. Now, it helps us to ask God and to look inward first, because sometimes it's not the other person. So he's asking God, okay, look at me, look at my heart, look at my thoughts. And if there's anything offensive, remove that away from me. Spiritual self introspection desires for God to reveal any sin in us, or those things that need to be changed for our good and overall well being. When you're being mistreated, it is easy to find fault in the bully. Unregulated emotions will make you feel hopeless and fight the wrong fight. But once we allow God to show us what's going on inside our spirits and in our minds, it makes us regulated and spiritually attuned to God's will for that moment. It is your weapon. God can and will reveal a plan for you. God's desire for his people is to have self control, which, by the way, is a fruit of the Spirit, which represents his kingdom. Introspection also encourages us to depend on God. David said in verse 24, after you have searched and tested me and know my anxious thoughts, lead me in the way of everlasting. We submit ourselves to Jesus' lordship. What, Lord, do you want me to do in this situation that will be everlasting for your kingdom? That is a question that I finally got to towards the end of of my experiences with Garland ISD. My desire, my goal was, Lord, let your will be done in whatever situation I am. If it means that I report these people, if it means that I fight back, if it means that I write letters, whatever it means, Lord, for your kingdom, for the people that exist in my influence who are also going through similar things, it is my desire, Lord, to do your will. That is building up God's kingdom. I also had the desire, what is the lesson to be learned? Because I knew I was a runner. I knew that I was a fighter if needed to be. I wanted God to teach me what he told me I needed to learn. And I had to trust that the situations would do that thing. I also want to read as we close part of Psalm 139, verses 8 through 12. This is very beautiful. And wherever you are, no matter what situation you're in, this allows us to understand and know God's presence. It says, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light becomes night around me, even in the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like day, for the darkness is as light to you. Nothing, friend, nothing and no one can block God's view of you. He is with you and for you. Rest in Him and find your peace to continue the journey or make the change that He's asking you to make.